Hello everyone. In the previous video of Advanced English course, we had talked about the basic of English grammar, and that was parts of speech. If you haven't watched that video, you can quickly do it right here and then you watch today's video. Because in today's video, we are talking about the second most important concept in English grammar, and that is sentences. Now, sentences is a huge topic. That's why we have divided into two parts. We'll be talking about part 1 today and part 2 in the coming session. All right. Now, before we talk about what are sentences, why are they important, I have something interesting that I want you to do. I want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Learn with Sam and Ash. This is the biggest size I could get for the subscribe so that you take it as if it's important. Okay. Let's talk about what you will find in today's video. We have topics such as sentence structure. Now, please understand, whenever you're trying to talk to somebody, you're writing something, every word combined together makes up a sentence. Every word, join them together, it becomes a sentence. So what is the right structure to write them? What is the grammatically correct structure? Second of all, we'll be talking about conjunctions. We already discussed about conjunctions in the parts of speech lecture, but in today's lecture, we'll be talking in detail. Variety of examples will be shared. And then we have the last important concept called as clauses. Clauses are way too important to understand types of sentences. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the first case, which is basic sentence structure. There is something called as basic written over here. Before we talk about sentence structure, we need to understand what is the basic sentence structure. If you ask me this question, Ash, can you give us a simple structure that add this word first, then this word, and then this word? That would be much better instead of us talking about sentences in detail. That's what exactly we're going to talk now. We'll be talking about what is the basic formula of a sentence. Once you have understood the basic formula, we'll talk about different types of sentences. Now, as you can see, this is case 1. That means there are many cases coming up to talk about sentence structure. If I talk about the basic sentence structure, the basic sentence structure looks something like this. A sentence requires at least a verb and a subject. If you want to write a sentence, you should definitely have a subject in it. You should definitely have a verb in it. If you don't have a subject or you don't have a verb, it will not be called a sentence. I have noticed many times students have a subject in their sentence, but they forget this part. You cannot write a sentence without a subject and a verb. Subject is something which is a noun or a pronoun that performs the action. You must be remembering what is the definition of a noun and pronoun from our previous lecture. Noun is the name of a person, place, or thing. Pronoun is a word which replaces noun so that we don't have to repeat ideas. Also, noun and pronoun can become the subject. Subject is something which performs the action. Who is doing the action? This word over here is important because he or she or it performs the action. Then we have verb. Verb is the action. For example, let's take an example right now to make this thing very clear. If I say Sam sings, in this sentence I have a subject, right? I have a verb. What is the subject? Subject is Sam, who is singing. Subject is doing the action of singing. That's why to make a sentence proper, you need a subject and a verb. This is basic sentence structure part 1. We'll have an example on your screen. In this example, if you notice carefully, I am singing. I is your subject. Is that correct? I is your subject. Singing is your main verb. Anybody who has this doubt, what is main verb, what is helping verb, what is a subject, what is adjective, what is article, please refer the first video called as parts of speech. I'm repeating it again. I'm repeating it 100 times because that's important. Alright, then we have helping verb. Helping verb comes before the main verb. Helping verb comes before the main verb. With the help of helping verb, main verb makes more sense. So subject, helping verb, main verb. This is basic sentence structure. In other words, we can say that it's important that we have a subject and we have a verb. Now, it's your responsibility that you pause this video right now, take out your notebook and make a note about the basic sentence structure. If you're done with this, let's move on to the second type, which is imperative sentences. Imperative sentences are different kinds of sentences, or you can call them, they are exceptions. Imperative sentences talks about commands. They only have a verb, they do not have a subject. They only have a verb in that sentence and they are more like commands. For example, stop, shut up, get out, leave me. All these words always will have an exclamation mark at the end of them, and you can also say that they have an hidden subject called as you. You don't have to write you stop, but you can assume that the subject in this sentence is you stop. So these words over here, which is only one word, can also be called as a sentence. They can be called as imperative sentences or command sentences. Is that clear to everyone? Wonderful. Let's talk about the segment 3, sentences with object. In part 3, we are talking about sentences with object. This word over here is really important because we have two kinds of objects and we'll be talking about them in detail. Over here, some sentences include objects. Some sentences include objects. What are objects? Let's find out. If you look at this example right now, we have friend, which is a subject, lands, which is a verb. Now there is something extra at the end of that sentence. This something extra is called as object. Is that clear? So from this table, from this dialogue right now, I can say that third sentence structure is that I should have a subject, I should have a verb, and I should have an object. To make a sentence complete, subject, verb, object. What is object? Anything extra at the end of the sentence apart from subject and verb is called as object. Is that clear? Now, in object itself, we have 1, 2, 3 parts. Let's divide them. Objects are of two types. There is something called as direct object, and then we'll be talking about indirect object. Direct object means, just understand the last line, the thing that is being lent. Let's look at this example. My friend lends me his book. So my friend becomes subject, lends become verb. What is this person giving? What is this person lending? He is lending book. Book becomes direct object. Books become direct object. What is the object that is being used to perform an action? What action is being performed on which object? In another way, the noun that receives the action. Now, I am guessing that this sometimes becomes really difficult to understand. So, we'll go with the second definition. That object on which you are performing the action. You are performing the action on book. Is that clear? My friend is doing the action of lending on the book. So, book becomes direct object. Let's talk about indirect object. Indirect object are those objects or that noun which receives the action. The one receiving the action. Who is receiving the book? Me. So, me becomes indirect object. This becomes direct object. This becomes subject and this becomes verb. Subject, verb, object. On which the action is taking place is direct object. Who is receiving that action becomes indirect object. Am I clear to everyone? 100%? Alright. Now, we have a small exercise right now on your screen. Sam passes Ash the book. This is an exercise. I want you guys to take a minute and answer all of these questions. What is the subject? What is verb? Direct object, indirect object, article. This is important. That's why you need to pause your video right now. Take a minute and do this. Okay? If you have done this, you can check the answer right now. Over here, we have Sam, which is a subject, of course. Then we have passes, which is a verb, of course, very simple. On which object is the action taking place? The book. So book becomes your direct object. Who is receiving it? Ash becomes indirect object. And there is an extra word over here which becomes your article. We'll have a detailed lecture about article in the later videos. You will find the link here soon. So in the later videos, we'll be talking about articles in proper length. Before we move to the next part of this video, let's have a quick revision. We have three types of sentence structure. Basic sentence structure, which has a subject and a verb. Second sentence structure is for imperative sentences, more like commands. Stop, shut up, get out. They always have an exclamation point. The third kinds of sentences are those which have a subject, verb, object. Objects are of two types, direct objects, indirect objects. In order to get this theory properly correct or into your system, write sentences after sentences. At least write 5 sentences for each category. If you do that, you will never forget these concepts. Moving on, we have the next segment, which is a few grammar rules that I have collected for you. And these are basic grammar rules. You should never ever miss these grammar rules. Never ever. The first one is, always capitalize the first letter of the first word of a sentence. If I am starting my sentence by saying, Sam is angry, so the first letter of the first word should always be capital. Always be capital. First letter of the first word. Second, the end of the sentence should either have a full stop, should have a question mark, or an exclamation point, or quotation mark, based on what kind of sentences are you writing. If you're writing a normal sentence, put a full stop. If you are asking a question, put a question mark. If you are writing imperative sentences, put an exclamation point. Based on what kind of sentence you are writing, you have to always have the right punctuation. These signs, full stop, quotation mark, all these are called as punctuations. We'll have a detailed lecture on these punctuations as well in the later video. Link is over here. Next, most sentences follow the structure. Subject comes first, verb second, object comes in the end. This is the basic sentence structure. Always make sentences with this structure. Okay. Now, I think we have one last rule which is called as subject-verb agreement. This is an important concept. Most of the grammar mistakes takes place in this concept. There is something called a subject-verb agreement or subject-verb arrangement. That means if the subject is singular, verb will be singular. They always go in balance. If the subject is plural, verb will be plural. So a singular subject requires a singular verb, plural subject requires a plural verb. So when I say the cat is singular, so you have to say runs. Now please don't assume that runs means plural because it has S. No, this is singular. This is plural. The cats run. Another example. Let's say Sam sing. They sing. Full stop, which is correct. They sing or Sam sing. So as I said, if you have plural subject, you need a plural verb. This is plural. But Sam is singular, so you have to put S or ES at the end of the verb. By adding S or ES at the end of the verb, you make them plural. So the correct grammar sentence is Sam sings. Always put that S and ES. Now, if you have doubts about S and ES, in the verb lecture in parts of speech, we have talked about regular verbs, irregular verbs, singular verbs, plural verbs. Please go to that lecture one more time. Moving on, we have next part of this video, which is called as clauses. This is a term that we have been using for some time now, and I want to take a minute before I show you the theory. Let's talk about clauses properly. Clauses are a combination of words which will always have a subject and a verb. Any combination of word, if you see these two things together, you can call them a clause. For example, Ash plays. This becomes a clause. subject, verb becomes a clause. Okay. Next, they are dancing. They are dancing in the theater. They are dancing in the theater. I'm guessing you can see it. They are dancing in the theater. This whole thing is a sentence. Is that correct? Subject, verb, object. In that sentence, we have one clause. This is a clause. Subject, verb. Subject, verb. Any combination of words which has a subject and a verb in it is called as clause. Always remember this. Now, we'll talk about in pure length with proper examples. Clauses is a group of words that has both a subject and a verb. If you have subject and verb together, you can call it as a clause. If one part is not there, it will not be a clause. Sam bought a new car. Subject, verb. This becomes clause. In this, if you notice carefully, this is one sentence. In this sentence, we have a clause. One sentence, one clause. Is that clear? If you have doubts, please watch the video again. You will be able to understand it. Let's move on. We have two more examples on your screen. Sam bought a new car, but he still has the old one. This is one sentence. From here to here, one sentence. How many clauses? Subject, verb, clause number 1. Subject, verb, clause 2. This is a sentence which has two clauses. Subject, verb, subject, verb. Two clauses, one sentence. Clear? Next example is on your screen. Although he still has his old one, comma, Sam now has a new car. Subject, verb, clause 1. Over here, subject and verb, clause 2. So I can say that one sentence, two clauses. What are we understanding from this? We are saying that in order to write one sentence properly, you should have at least one clause. In order to write complicated sentences, you can have more than one clause. Is that clear? In this sentence, you have two clauses, but this is one sentence. Now, what kind of sentence is this? We'll be talking in the next video. Link is over here. What kind of sentence is this? In the next video. These are different kinds of sentences. What you need to understand from this lecture right now is to how to identify a clause. Subject, verb. Wherever you see subject, verb together, it becomes a clause. Moving on to the next concept. We have two kinds of clauses, which you can see properly on your screen. We have independent clause. As the name suggests, it's independent. It's independent. You don't have to depend on anybody. It makes sense by itself, expresses a complete thought. Sam bought a new car. Subject, verb. Sam bought makes total sense. Sam bought a new car make total sense. There is nothing missing in this sentence. Any clause which expresses a complete thought, it does not depend on anybody, is called as independent clause. On the other hand, dependent clauses are those clauses that does not make sense by itself and they never express a complete thought. For example, although he still has his old one. Old one what? Why does he have his old one? There is a lot of information missing in this sentence. So whenever we have a clause which does not express full information, they are called as dependent clause. They depend on main independent clauses to make sense. We'll talk about these things later. Why do I have independent and dependent clauses? What is the need of joining them together? How to make sentences? We'll be talking about these things later. Right now, you need to understand any group of subject and verb which does not make sense by itself is called as dependent. Which makes sense by itself is called as independent. Okay? Alright. Next, we have two examples of independent clauses on your screen. Sam bought a new car, but he still has his old one. Subject verb, clause 1. Subject verb, clause 2. So, we have clause 1, independent. Clause 2, independent. Why? Sam bought a new car. Makes sense. He still has his old car. Makes sense. We have not written car here again because this is a pronoun. If you remember, there was numeral pronoun which replaces the noun so that we don't have to repeat them. So Sam bought a new car, clause 1. He still has his old car, clause 2. Both the clauses are independent clauses. Although he still has his old one, Sam now has a new car. Although he still has his old one, Sam now has a new car. In this, we have two clauses. He has clause 1, Sam has clause 2, but only one clause is independent, the second one. The first one is dependent. The second one is independent. Can you see that? Whenever we have words like these attached to a clause, it automatically becomes dependent clause. Anywhere in a sentence, if you find subordinating conjunctions attached to a sentence, that particular part of the sentence becomes a dependent clause. Subordinating conjunctions. What are coordinating conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions? Just wait for 2 minutes. We'll be talking about them as well. Let's move on to the next part of the video. We have dependent clauses. Now on the screen you can see, although he still has his old one, subject, verb. This is a clause and we have a subordinating conjunction written in front. Without independent clause, this sentence becomes a sentence fragment. There is something called as sentence fragment. Sentence fragment is a part of a sentence which does not have an independent clause, which only has dependent clause. It's incomplete. That's why it's called as sentence fragment piece. Dependent clause makes sense only when attached to an independent clause. So if I want this sentence to be complete, I need to have an independent clause written somewhere. I need to have independent clause written somewhere to make it grammatically correct. So next time if you're trying to write a sentence or you're trying to talk to somebody, please understand, are you writing it completely? One more point you need to understand from this. If you notice this sentence, let me make some space so that we can talk about it. Okay, my eraser isn't working. Fine. Now if you notice here, there is something called as subordinating conjunction. Perfect. There is subject. There is verb. This is a prepositions. I'm not sure how many of you can identify this. This is a verb. This is a pronoun. This is old adjective. It's talking about the car. How old is the car? One is a pronoun which is talking about the noun. We have talked about each one of them in parts of speech. Number 1. If you have referred that lecture properly, you could see how you have to join so many words together to make a grammatically correct sentence. If I don't write this, this is grammatically wrong. If you don't write this, it's okay. We can still say it's okay, but you have to indicate which car are we talking about. So automatically I have to say old car. If I write car here again, that is also not correct. It's not grammatically incorrect, but it does not look fine. So you have to use a pronoun. If you want to get your grammar correct 100%, there are only 2 rules. You have to break your sentences into as many words possible and understand the roles of each and every word. So I have a homework for you. Take any book, any article, take 5 sentences and break them. What is a subject? What is a verb? What is a dependent clause? What is an independent clause? What is an article? What is a preposition? Break your sentences into as many pieces together. Then analyze them. Why are they joined together? Why this word comes here? Why not here? You have to do this exercise and I'm not asking you to do this exercise forever. Do it for at least 15-20 days. Your grammar will automatically be solved. Because now you're breaking things, you're going into basics. You're not just learning rules, you're exercising them. So it's really important you do this. Let's move on to the next segment of this class. We have another example on your screen. Although he still has his old one, the dependent clause usually begins with a subordinating conjunction. Whenever you find a sentence starting with this subordinating conjunction, that sentence becomes dependent clause. this is not part of dependent clauses, but this is a dependent clause. It can also start with relative pronouns such as who, whom, whose, that, which. If you find a sentence starting with these words, you can call them as dependent clauses. Please understand them. We'll have detailed exercises on this in the next video where I'll be talking about types of sentences. Okay? Now let's move on to the next part of the video. In the next part, we have a simple structure. Sam now has a new car. Subject, verb, clause 1, which is independent clause. Although, which is a subordinating conjunction. Subject, verb, he still has his old one, dependent clause. So you can see a good grammar sentence to have a structure like this: independent clause, subordinating conjunction, dependent clause. Wherever this word is attached to the sentence, that sentence becomes a dependent clause. This word decides whether this is a dependent clause or not. This word which does not have anything becomes your independent clause. Okay? Let's move on. We have a rule that you have to understand. Where can I write this? I have shown you two examples. In the first example, although was coming in the front. In the second example, although was coming in the center. In the third example, although was coming in the center. Here, it's coming in the end in a way, in the start. In this, it's coming in the middle. Start, middle. So, you can say that dependent clauses can come in the second part of the sentence, in the first part of the sentence, or in the middle of the sentence. 3 places. If you're writing in the second part, you have to put a comma before the conjunction. If you're writing in the first, you have to put a comma when you start the second clause. If you're writing in the middle, you have to put a comma before and you have to put a comma after. If you don't write these commas, you're making a mistake. If you have although in the start, you don't have to put a comma here. You only have to put a comma here. If you're writing in the second part, you have to start with a comma. Analyze these sentences properly to understand where can I put my dependent clause. In the start of the sentence, at the end of the sentence, in the middle of the sentence. Okay? Now, let's move on to the next part. We have 2 examples of dependent clauses on your screen. Because the heavy rains flooded the entrance to the building. We are starting a sentence with a subordinating conjunction. So, this sentence becomes a dependent clause. After Ash carefully watched the assigned video, subordinating conjunction, this becomes a dependent clause. These 2 sentences do not have any independent clauses, so they are called as sentence fragments. Sentence fragments. They are not sentences, they are fragments. Okay, let's move on to the last part of this video. This has become a very lengthy video and I want you to take a pause, drink a cup of coffee and then come back to join the video. We'll be talking about conjunctions now. Conjunctions are those words which connect or those connect words, any 2 words. For example, ice cream plus coffee. If I write ice cream and coffee, this is joining 2 words. This word over here is a conjunction. It can join 2 clauses. We have already seen that. Although we are joining 2 clauses or phrases. Phrases does not necessarily have a subject and a verb. It's just a group of words. Just a group of words. That's the difference between a clause and a phrase. In order to call something a clause, it should have a subject and a verb. Okay. Now, we have an example of couple of conjunctions: and, because, or, yet, etc. And, because, or, yet, etc. Let's see more. We have 2 more examples on your screen. I want drinks and ice cream, joining 2 words together. Okay. We were late because it was raining, joining 2 clauses together. Clause 1, clause 2 joined together with the help of a conjunction. Let's move on to the types of conjunctions. In the previous video, we had already talked about 5 kinds, but in today's video, we'll be only focusing on coordinating and subordinating. If you could understand coordinating and subordinating conjunctions properly, you have done a wonderful job. Let's talk about these two. The first one we have is coordinating conjunctions. And in order to understand coordinating conjunction, you only have to understand one thing. There is something called as fanboys: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Anywhere, if you find these words written, these are called as coordinating conjunctions. And coordinating conjunctions are used mostly to make compound sentences. If you have clause 1, coordinating conjunction, clause 2, it becomes a compound sentence. Clause 1, and which clause are we talking about? We are talking about independent clause 1 plus coordinating conjunction, independent clause 2. This becomes a compound sentence. Don't worry, we'll be talking about compound sentences in the next video. This is just a hint. This is what you have to remember. In order to remember coordinating conjunctions, remember fanboys. Okay, let's move on. We have examples on your screen. It was raining, so I carried umbrella. Coordinating conjunction, clause 1, clause 2. Both the clauses are independent clauses. Please understand this carefully. Independent clauses, they make sense. She is beautiful but not intelligent. Coordinating conjunction. I can drink chocolate shakes or cold drinks. Coordinating conjunctions. Independent clause. Is that clear? These are just quick revision examples. Then we have subordinating conjunction. In order to remember subordinating conjunction, this is a shortcut. Actually, there is something missing over here. We have on a white bus. I'll give you the complete details on a white bus later. But in order to understand white words, you can see this. Although, whenever, however, if, though, even if, because, unless, since. In order to remember all of these words, you have to remember this. They are used to form complex sentences and compound complex sentences. We'll talk about these two kinds of sentences later. I'm not going to go into detail right now. Let's move on to see some examples. The first one, if she calls, let me know. Subordinating conjunction. This is dependent clause. This is independent clause. Clear? Whenever I call her, dependent clause, she pretends to be busy. Independent clause. Wherever these words are added, that part of the sentence becomes dependent clause. Because he was ill, he did not attend the party. Subordinating conjunction, dependent clause, and independent clause. Is that clear? Take your time, pause the video, go back to it again. Understand it slowly and gradually. Next, we have call to action. I have a couple of requests from you guys. First thing is, you have to like the video if you genuinely like the content. If you didn't like the content, it's fair enough. You have to subscribe so that you can be in touch for more grammar tips and the advanced English course. And then if you have any doubts and questions about the sessions, comment it. If you need the free data for this particular video where I'll be giving you all these sentences that we have discussed and few exercises, you can write us an email. This was a very lengthy session. I hope you have a cup of coffee and you had enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next video. Till then, enjoy. Bye-bye.